everyone, and welcome to Crunch Time, a panel discussion show about your favorite topic, sports. I'm your host, Kirsten Krull, and here you will see three panelists battle it out to show who can come out on top. Joining us today are Chris Pearson, Nick Maxson, and Blake Tyson. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Good?
Good. Ready to get some good debate going?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna beat you.
I like it. I like
All
the
right.
intensity already.
All right.
I'm ready to go too, so let's get right into it. The MLB playoffs are underway, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on your predictions for the rest of this postseason. The ALCS and NLCS will be kicking off this weekend, and we are sure to have some exciting matchups. So who are you guys picking to move on to the NL and AL post games? Chris, let's start with you, and we'll take a look at the AL.
Okay, in the AL, I think it's fairly obvious that Houston will be moving on. They had the best season in the AL all year. Outside of, obviously, I mean, they were the second seed, so they were playing against the Indians, but the Indians had that crazy game win streak. Houston has been so good all year, and they beat number 3 Boston, who was the first team out of the AL East. The Yankees were only a wild card, and the second out of the AL East. I believe they will be able to beat them. Probably not in 3 like they did this last series, but that's how it goes.
No way. No, absolutely no way is Houston moving on. I have the Yankees moving on in this ALCS. Here's the reason why. They're a young team. They have nothing to lose right now. I think that the Yankees have one of the better pitching staffs in baseball right now, especially their bullpen. CC Sabathia going 6 innings, Game 5 in an elimination game against Cleveland. They came back down 2-0 and were able to close out the Indians, who should have handed them in 3 games. I think the Yankees, with a young team, they have nothing to lose. They're the team I'm picking to go to the World Series from the AL.
Well, I think you said it right there. The Yankees are a young team. They're inexperienced. They haven't been here before. I mean, Aaron Judge, as great as a season he's had, he struck out 15 times in that series against the Indians. I think he's a little cold right now. They're going to need Didi Gregorius to step it up. And I think their bullpen, if they're to move on, I think their bullpen is going to have to be very good. But I'm going with the Astros. I think Verlander and Keuchel are going to be very good. Jose Altuve is red hot right now, and I'm going to have to go with the Astros.
I completely agree with Brady. I mean, you talk about weapons, a young team like Carlos Correa, the people like that, Justin Verlander, you talk about a lot of the bullpen, there's so many good players from that team. I think it's just obvious they will beat them.
Now let's move on from the AL to the NL. Who are your picks there?
Moving on here, I think I've got the Dodgers. I said it last year. If you want to find a clip of me saying that on this show last year, I did. I said the Dodgers would win the World Series. They had the best season in baseball, went cold at the end of the season, and then swept the D-backs. The D-backs looked like a good team going into the playoffs, and the Dodgers have just done so well. Cody Bellinger having the best rookie season out of anybody. Aaron Judge looked like he was better at the first. Not anymore. Cody Bellinger, best rookie of the year candidate all year. Dodgers will win the World Series too.
You got the Dodgers. I actually have the Cubs going on for
Why
the
are you
NLCS.
debating me on everything?
Why not? I mean, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, you're right.
Seriously. But no, I think the Cubs, they learned a lot from their postseason berth last year. And being with, I like their pitching. I like their experience. I like Rizzo. I like Bryant. I think their depth in their lineup is going to overpower and get them into the get them into the World Series. I just don't think that the Dodgers, the way they went cold, and when they get into a high-pressure situation here to get to the World Series, I think they're going to crumble. I like Clayton Kershaw. I like the starting pitching, but the Cubs, I think, have the postseason experience. I know what it takes to win a World Series. That's why I have the Cubs.
Okay. I'll let Brady go. But you talk about the Dodgers being cold. Who just swept their series? And who's playing in Game 5?
Yeah. Fair
Dodgers.
enough.
All right, we'll take
Dodgers.
a break from that, Blake.
I think I'm going to have to go with not the Cubs. You don't win 2 World Series, or at least make it back to the World Series in consecutive years after not winning one in 100 years. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just think it's crazy to think that they're going to do it. I'm going to go with the Dodgers. I think Clayton Kershaw, as bad as he has been in the playoffs throughout his career, I think he's going to step it up. I think he's going to pitch really good. I think they've got Rich Hill, Yu Darvish can both step it up, pitch very well for them. And they've got some guys that are pretty hot in their lineup right now. Yasiel Puig's pretty good, and Cody Bellinger, very, very good rookie.
Chris and Blake, I think you had some really good points with the Astros, but the point for this one is going to you, Nick. I think the Cubs, they have the experience from last season, and I think they'll be able to make a deep run again this year. So, it's all.
Thank you.
The Boston Red Sox have fired manager John Farrell after the Red Sox were eliminated in the ALDS for the second straight year. The Red Sox have a payroll of over $160 million, and majority owner John Henry thought Farrell's accomplishments simply just weren't good enough. But what do you guys think? Nick, we'll start off with you.
I mean, you're looking at title town, Boston. The expectations in that town is World Series or bust. And when you have a general manager that goes and wins the AL at least 2 years in a row, they get knocked out in the divisional round. They don't even make it to the ALCS. There was rumors that the president of baseball operations and them had a disagreement. They weren't really in line with the same direction for the team. So I think combined with that and the fact that Red Sox fans, they breed and live and breathe for the World Series, I think that was the reason for John Farrell's exit from the Red Sox organization.
Blake, what's your take?
Yeah, I think that it was time for him to go. I mean, he won a World Series his first year there, but his history as a coach or as a manager just isn't very good. He's made the playoffs only 3 times in his 9 years as a coach. I mean, the Red Sox had the 3rd highest payroll in all of baseball. They had probably the Cy Young winner in Chris Sale, and I just think that he never really did anything with them that was all that impressive after the first World Series win, and I think it was a big disappointment for Red Sox fans and for Boston in general.
Chris?
This is dumb. They've won the AL East. Like you said, he won a World Series. This is just dumb. Why are you firing a guy who is successful? You don't fire successful people. Let's talk about teams that aren't successful, like the Mariners, the A's, there's so many other teams.
But do you expect those teams to be successful? I mean,
No,
Oakland is the lowest in payroll every single season.
It doesn't matter, though. This is why teams hate Boston and New York, because they have so much money and they just throw it around. It's just like when the Cleveland Cavaliers fired their old coach to get Tyson Lue. It doesn't matter. Yeah, they won a championship that year. They would have with the same coach. It doesn't matter. This is a dumb point. He should not have been fired.
Chris, I'm going to go ahead and give you the point for this one. I totally agree with what you say. I think it was kind of absurd that he was fired. And this situation also kind of reminds me of when, if you take a look at the NFL, when Jerry Jones came in and fired Jimmy Johnson. What was the reason for that? Championship winning coaches. So the point goes to you for that one. This is going to end the first part of our show. When we come back, we'll discuss the action from the first season of hockey. Stay with us.
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. This cat makes me make art. He's my best friend, but a lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Remember that to love America is to love all Americans, because love has no labels.
The NHL is underway with season number 101, and another year also brings new changes. The NHL is starting off the 2017 season with a few edits to the rulebook. These changes have affected the use of a coach's challenge on an offside play, player positioning on face-offs, and high sticking on a power play. Do you guys think these changes will help advance the game of hockey or hold it back? Blake, we'll start off with you this time.
Well, I think that the changes are mostly towards trying to get more goal scoring. I mean, slashing penalties are being called pretty much anytime you hit anybody with your stick now. And in fact, so far this season, 48% of games have been on the power play. Like, time of the game has been played on the power play. I think that's a bit absurd. I mean, you're basically doing nothing now with your 3rd and 4th liners. They just need to be penalty kill guys. You've focused on your high skill guys. I mean, I get that's what people like to see is high scoring, but I think traditionally a lot of people like to see a good defensive game sometimes, and I think it slows down the game and it makes it more about your top end guys rather than depth on a team.
Nick?
It's horrible for the game of hockey because what you're doing is you're interrupting the flow of the game. The slashes that are being called by the refs, these are the kind of slashes that have been happening around the league since the game was incepted. It's stick on stick. It's nothing malicious. I know they're trying to crack down on over-the-wrist injuries. The face-off violations are absolutely absurd. Every team is going to cheat. I do think that eventually the referees are going to tone it back because essentially you're getting a guy thrown into the penalty box for a face-off violation. It seemed like every 2 or 3 face-offs. And for me, it's just when you interrupt the flow of the game of hockey, where it's whistle after whistle after whistle, that's going to take a lot of the fan enjoyment out of the game. And I think these rule changes are absolutely ridiculous.
I like these rules. I like all of them. I think it's going to make hockey a brand new 21st century sport. It's going to be fantastic. The slashing, obviously stick on stick, that's dumb. It shouldn't happen. But stick on wrist, it's, stopping people from doing a bad thing.
How was it 21st century?
Because it's just bringing it into a new era of hockey. It's going to be so much better. But like I was saying, though, it's going to stop if people stop as much with the lesser slashing. It's going to stop with bigger slashing, which is going to stop with injuries. So that's always good. Face-offs, it's going to bring less cheating and make a better draw that's better for the best centerman, the best drawman in the league, and make it more competitive. And with the icing timeouts, I think that's fair because taking a timeout on an icing is a cheap way to get an advantage that could lead to a goal, which probably will tie the game.
Chris, those are all good points. So you're going to go ahead and get the point for this. I agree, people still may cheat on faceoffs, but I think this will help resolve that issue. The Minnesota Wild are looking to get back on track after suffering a devastating season-ending loss to the St. Louis Blues in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs last season. The Wild are currently sitting 0-1-1 early on. How do you think they'll fare this year, Blake?
I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they're a wild card team this year. I don't see. You got Zach Parise hurt to start the season with a back injury. Backs are so difficult to predict. I think they lost a lot of depth when they traded away Marco Scandella, although I think they did help their forward depth. When they traded Scandella, they got Tyler Ennis and Marcus Foligno. Foligno's a physical guy. It's something the Wild have been missing for a long time. He's top 5 in the NHL in hits last year. You had Matt Cullen, who's great on the penalty kill. He won 51% of his faceoffs last year, 31 points on the fourth line for Pittsburgh. I think he's going to help contribute offense and really help the depth of Minnesota. My only question and concern is who's the backup goalie? I mean, Devin Dubnyk played 60 games last year. That's my worry. He needs to play a little bit less, and I think Alex Stalock or Nicholas Svedberg needs to step up into that backup role.
Nick?
I couldn't agree with you more, but the problem that they're actually going to have more than their goaltending is going to be the defense in front of them. Devin Dubnyk is a guy that when he came to the Minnesota Wild had a career turnaround from going to the Arizona Coyotes. Now, mind you, he's benefited just like Stalock would have by having a great, solid defensive scheme in front of him. The problem is that they brought in a new defensive coach after the departure of Scott Stevens named Bob Woods. He's a much more offensive style for the defense. Their first 2 losses of the season were very much because the Wild are trying to be more aggressive in the neutral zone. They really want to push the puck, cause transition hockey to go back towards the offense. This team is going to be scary if they get locked down on their own end just because, like you said, Marco Scandella gets traded to Buffalo. That puts Matt Dumba in a top 4 position, which I think we all know he's just not ready for just quite yet. And then you bring in longtime defensive folks from New Jersey, and then you also have young guy Mike Riley stepping up. The defensive end and this team is scary, and I just don't think that they can last, and I think they're actually out of the playoffs this year.
Chris?
I agree with Blake. I think that they will be a wild card team. Right now they're the bottom of the Central, but it's so early to tell because we're so new into the season. I think, relatively, they made some big moves in the offseason, but I think relatively you have a pretty similar looking team from last year, and obviously they were the best until they started dropping off at the end of last season. If Dubnyk stands up to his standards and plays through, then I think they'll make the wild card and they'll be in the playoffs.
Okay. Good points, guys. And I think, defense wins games, but Blake, you're going to get the point for this. You had phenomenal stats to back up your argument. Rules aren't the only thing that have changed in the NHL this season. The Las Vegas Golden Knights are underway with their inaugural season and have started their team off with a perfect 3-0 record. What are your thoughts on this franchise? And do you think Las Vegas is going to be a city that's going to show them some love? Chris?
Well, first of all, I think that fans have come out in numbers. I was completely wrong about this. I said that Las Vegas is a dumb place for a franchise because they'd only be a sideshow. Just like all the other sideshows you see in Las Vegas, all these acts, it looks like they have a great fan base and they're ready to become a full-fledged championship team. They've won 3 games so far. Still early to tell. You have a veteran in the net at Fleury. He's been super good. Been with the Penguins for a long time. Won a couple Stanley Cups with them and now leaves. I think he could be a goalie that would lead them to a Stanley Cup. Probably not this year, but in a couple years down the road.
There's no question this team relies on Marc-Andre Fleury. This team, led by Gerard Gallant, mind you, head coach of the Florida Panthers, led them to their last playoff run 2.5 years ago, was let go in the middle of the season last year and didn't even get a call a taxi. He had to pretty much pick himself up one. So treated very poorly. He's got this young Vegas team on a very aggressive forecheck. When they had their home opener against the Arizona Coyotes, just pinned the Coyotes in their own zone. They have young legs. They like to get on the forecheck. Defense is a few holes here and there, but once again, Marc-Andre Fleury is going to have to be their rock and net. If they're going to be successful, they're going to have to rely on solid goaltending because they just have too young of a core right now on their back end. But for me, this team is going to be shown on offense with James Neal putting the puck in the net, Thomas Nosek. They're going to have great pieces moving forward.
I'm going to have to agree with you with Fleury. I think he's going to be really huge. He was kind of the backbone of the Penguins for years. He was the #1 overall pick, I think in 2003 it might have been. He's really, he's proven that he can win. He's going to be what the Golden Knights need if they want to win. They've got some good depth up front. I think that James Neal is going to really step it up this year. He had 41 points last year. That was kind of playing a second, third line kind of role for Nashville. I think he's going to step up in a first line role, produce a lot of points this year. He already has. I think that they're going to have the best season of an expansion team ever. Just because of the goaltending, mostly with Fleury. I think that they've got some decent young defensemen back in the back there. Nate Schmidt, I know, comes to mind. He's from St. Cloud here, and I think that they'll be about 80 points.
Interesting. Okay. Blake, I'm going to have to go ahead and give you a point on this one, too. I think goaltending's the backbone, and as you mentioned, Fleury's that guy for the Knights. We may be halfway done with our show, but lucky for you, there's still more debate to be had. Stay with us as our panelists share their thoughts on the Vikings' shaken-up roster and if they think the Penguins can pull off a three-peat. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Crunch Time, and all of our panelists are currently tied 2 apiece. Guys, how are you feeling at this point in the show?
Feeling good.
Confident.
Got some good competition.
Confident.
I expected less out of you, but it's fine.
Oh.
I expected more to you, so that's fine.
Oh.
All right. Well, keep that energy flowing, guys. We got some more topics to talk about. I'm sure these next couple topics are going to stir up a lot of controversy for some of the panelists we have here with us tonight. Let's start off with one that Minnesota Wild fans will have some strong opinions on. After defeating the Nashville Predators in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals and becoming the first team in NHL history to ever win back-to-back titles, everyone's questioning if the Penguins will be able to pull off a three-peat. So, guys, do you think this is going to be possible? Chris, start off.
I don't think it. I think this is extremely rare. This winning a three-peat is much like winning the Triple Crown in horse racing. It's 3 in a row. That's very hard. Like I said in the last 2 with the season outlooks, it's very early season, but they have a 1 in 32 chance. I just really don't see it happening. There are dynamic talents in the East where they're playing this year with Aaron Matthews in Toronto. The Lightning still looking good. They're looking even better this year, led by Stamkos. You know, they got some good players. But also the Washington Capitals. President's Cup the last 2 years, eliminated by the Penguins in the playoffs. Like, they are hungry for a cup, and I think if they meet up in a third time, Capitals take it this year.
I disagree. I mean, the Washington Capitals also had to get rid of half of their roster due to salary cap issues. Now, the Pittsburgh Penguins, I can't agree with you more. The fact that they won't be able to three-peat. They lost a lot of their depth. They lost Nick Bonino to the Nashville Predators. They had to bring in Antti Niemi, who was bought out from his contract in Dallas. So goaltending, they're going to be hurting. He was pulled after a 4-goal appearance against Chicago in their opening game where they lost 10-1. Yes, you still have Sidney Crosby. Yes, you have Evgeny Malkin. Yes, you've got Phil Kessel. Guys are in the top 10 in scoring almost every single year. But the defense bugs me. Their depth bothers me. And their goaltending, they're going to have to rely on Matt Murray a whole lot, who has been inconsistent the last couple of starts. And I just feel like the Penguins won't have enough depth to get over the hump for the third-peat.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I think who else in the Eastern Conference is going to really come out? I mean, Toronto's young. I think that's going to kill them in the playoffs. I think they're too inexperienced. Washington never can seem to get past the second round. I think that the Penguins do have a pretty good chance of three-peating. I think they will be, at least in the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not quite sure if they'll win the Cup, but I think that there's a good chance that they do. I think that with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Phil Kessel, Jake Gensel, who stepped up in the playoffs last year, had a huge playoff. It's going to be really, really key for this team, for those guys to be good. Also, they had Chris Letang, who missed all the playoffs last year, and I'm pretty sure some of the regular season. He's back, fully healthy, ready to go this year, and I think that that's a huge addition to their defensive core, along with youngster Olli Mata.
The good thing about the NHL is that this isn't the NBA. They're not comprised of super teams, so absolutely not will the Penguins be able to do a three-peat. And also, this is a sensitive topic for me because I'm a huge Nashville Predators fan, and watching the Stanley Cup Finals last year just was very upsetting. Nick, you get the point on this one. You kind of dug into the Penguins a little bit, and I loved every second of it.
Thank you.
The Minnesota Vikings have been plagued by injuries after their key offensive positions, with injuries to quarterbacks Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford, and now running back Dalvin Cook is being added to that mix. Are the Vikings still playoff contenders, even with all of these injuries? Nick?
They are, as long as they start Case Keenum. the
Couldn't even get his
appearance.
name right?
I know, right?
Come on, man.
He's a backup. He's a backup quarterback, but as a backup, you would think he's a second starter the way he's played. Came in with the last series in the first half against the Chicago Bears, was able to pull out what would have been a very terrible loss against the Bears, being down. They were up 3-2 at that point. But I think with Casey Keenum in there, he's got the mobility. He's got trust in his receivers with Thielen, Diggs, as well as Kyle Rudolph. I think he can lead the team to the playoffs, and with a defense like the Minnesota Vikings have, I think they just have enough to squeak in. They'll be a wild card team, but I think they have enough to get in.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that they're going to be contending for a wild card spot. I think 9-7 might be able to get you in this year. 10-6, I think for sure will. I think Bradford, personally, I think he's done for the year. I don't see how not playing Case Keenum, how playing Bradford over Keenum with the way that he looked, especially Monday night against the Bears, is going to help this team. And I think it's very interesting. Teddy Bridgewater is able to come off the physically unable to perform list here after this week. I think there's a possibility that if Keenum doesn't play well, that he can play starting in Week 10 following the bye. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I think with Dalvin Cook going down, I mean, yeah, it's a blow, but you paid Latavius Murray this offseason $15 million over 3 years for a reason. I mean, he was the talk of the town, he was the hype before we drafted Cook. So I think that you just have to have faith in that running game. And also Jerick McKinnon. They're both of them were starters last year, so I think one of them can definitely step into that role and start this year.
Okay, really quickly, they needed to solidify the QB. That means you can't wishy-washy. We all love Bridgewater. We want him to come back, but you got to get Keenum in there now. You got to get him practicing. You got to get him reps. He's going to win. If you see Sam Bradford, he got sacked twice by his own offensive line in the first game. That was so bad. If they solidify it, their offense looks better like they did in the second half of the game with Case Keenum. They'll be fine. I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't know how much further they'll go from there. But the defense is completely fine. Harrison Smith, he won the game for them. Defense is set. Offense gets better. They're in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Chris, I'm going to give you the point on this one, but I kind of disagree with you in the sense that the Vikings are going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're strong enough to do so. And also, I hate to say it, but they're a Minnesota team. Minnesota teams don't make the playoffs, and when they do,
Don't say that. You're making us cry. You're making Nick cry.
Hey,
I don't have a tear in my eye. What the heck are you talking about?
just the facts. Just the facts. On Tuesday night, disaster struck for the U.S. men's national soccer team as they were eliminated from World Cup contention with their loss to Trinidad and Tobago. This was the first time the men's team had missed the World Cup since 1986. Guys, how big of a setback is that for the men's team, and what should they do going forward? Blake?
I think it's just disappointing, kind of a disgrace to USA Soccer. I mean, not only did they miss the World Cup this year, but the last 2 Olympics they've also missed. I think that's pretty sad. I mean, honestly, USA Soccer, there's been tons of money put into it to develop young players, and it's not happening. They're not seeing them. I mean, they got Bobby Wood, Christian Pulisic, DeAndre Yedlin. They're all very good players, but they've got a lot of aging veterans on that team that are still playing, and I think that they need to have some sort of a youth movement. I think it was a good idea to fire Bruce Arena. I'm not so much sure that they should have fired Jurgen Klinsmann when they did. I think that, yeah, they were playing bad, but I think he would have been able to get him out of it. I think he was a better coach than Bruce Arena, but I think that it's just disappointing for USA Soccer with how much they've put into this to try to develop a good program and just fail to seem to do it.
Nick?
Well, I think you need wholesale changes. I think you need leadership change from just the organization up top, bottom. USA Soccer invested a lot of time and money in the early 2000s to really grow the game of soccer within the U.S., and they had a surge of players. When you miss the last 2 Olympics, then you fail to make the World Cup. You completely derail the movement and the youth movement in USA Soccer. And if you're going to have a sport like soccer in this country be able to pick up by more young people, and to gauge interest, you need a successful program. And that the way it's been running now, there's nothing to really to go behind. So I just think you need to clean the house in the organization, get new voices, get new ideas in there, and from there start from scratch so that we can get this organization back on track.
This was insanely sad, me being a huge soccer fan. I was expecting them to make the World Cup all year. But some dumb moves, just dumb things like not beating Trinidad and Tobago. That screwed it up. Things like that. But Bruce Arena being fired, that's sad. It's over. Jurgen Klinsmann being fired, he needed to be fired when he did. I disagree with you there. The experiment went way too far. Now is the time to hire American. We need to get someone like Peter Vermes of Sporting KC. He came in, dynamically changed the club of KC, made them into an MLS powerhouse, and won the 2013 MLS Cup. He hasn't coached a national team ever, and this is a good place to start with a youth team that's coming in. You got people like Dom Dwyer, out of Atlanta now. They've got such good places to go. And this coach was a U.S.-born guy, played for the U.S. for 11 years. He knows this club.
I'm not necessarily sure that bringing in a U.S. guy is going to be really good because I mean, we're MLS players. They're trying to keep Americans in the MLS. I think it's better for them development-wise to go overseas and play, and I think that's where you got to find your coaches too.
Sorry to cut us off here, guys. We're over on time, but you know, organizations, they start from the top up, and that's just how it is. Chris, you get the point. I think it starts with the coaching, and I think that's a big change that the U.S. team needs to make moving forward. That's going to do it for the debate portion of our show. When we come back, we'll announce the winner for this week's edition of Crunch Time.
UTVS and Huskies go great together, just like UTVS and its award-winning sports coverage. Tune into the very best coverage of Husky athletics on Charter Channels 21 and 180. Also on the St. Cloud State Athletics Channel 823, and of course streaming online at utvs.com. Don't miss a second of the action.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Our panelists have battled it out for another week here at the Crunch Time studio, but only one of them came out on top. Before we announce this week's winner, let's go around and check on where everyone stands with points. Blake had 2 to end the night, Nick had 3, and Chris is our winner with 4. His argument with soccer kind of brought him in over Nick, so congratulations, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now we're going to go in touching on a little more topics for the final drive, so you can give us your final thoughts. And for the first one, we're going to start off with Roger Goodell.
Right.
A memo from Roger Goodell to NFL owners was leaked, and Goodell was asking the owners to tell their players to stand for the anthem. What are your thoughts on this controversial situation?
I think this is dumb. This is obviously a stunt by rich owners and leaders of the NFL instead of standing with the players that, you know, they represent, the fans that they represent, because this is a movement that the NFL players are trying to show that there's inequality in the league, there's inequality in our country, and it needs to change. But also people like Jerry Jones, it seems very spineless with some of these owners, because he knelt on the sidelines with his players and now is changing this rule. It's just dumb.
I love that you brought that up, because I was just going to say how not even controversial, how hypocritical it was for Jerry Jones to get on the field.
And other owners just like them.
Exactly, and then they're going to come back and say, no, you're going to be kicked off the team if you do that.
Exactly.
I think that's totally unacceptable. The MLB playoffs are in full swing as we move on to the League Championship Series. Who has been your favorite playoff MVP so far?
Favorite playoff MVP? Jose Altuve of the Astros. They swept the Red Sox, looking good. He's my MVP pick for all year. I think he's the best one, putting the best season and the best postseason. I think if the Astros make it to the World Series, he's got it.
Now, last question we have for you here tonight. The NFL season is nearing its midway point, and some teams have had disastrous starts, namely the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants. Which team has the best chance of ending up with the #1 overall draft pick?
Well, the Giants obviously have hurt because they don't have Odell, they don't have Brandon Marshall anymore, but they've still put together some things before. You see with Tom Coughlin, they've put together weird seasons where all of a sudden they've won a Super Bowl and you're like, where'd that come from? Where the Browns have not done anything since 2000 and before. They have never done anything. I think the Browns maybe go 1-15 this year, maybe get that 1 win. The Giants maybe 3 wins. The Giants, I think, will end up being better.
You know, the Giants always do have a way of pulling something out of them, and I hate to say that because I love to see the Giants struggle, being a huge Dallas Cowboys fan.
Right.
But I agree, the Browns, they don't have a lot going for them ever. They need to get that program back on track. Thank you for your time here, Chris, and thank you to the rest of our panelists. Great job tonight, and we will see you all back here next week. Thank you for tuning in tonight to Crunch Time.